Welcome to Wizard Team, a Black magical podcast for Black magical stories.
Hi everyone, it's Bayana and Porshèa embarking on a journey through the many fantasy stories written by and about Black people. Today we're covering Almost There, a twisted, this is the opposite way, a Disney twisted tale by Farrah Rochon.
All right. So if you know Princess and the Frog lore, clearly that's what this book is based on because the title is Almost There. But first, just some context before we get into like our full discussion, which really is whether or not we've seen Princess and the Frog. I have, but mostly because when it came out, when it came out, my sister, like who's closer in age to me, was the demographic, so I saw it with her. And then when Ami was old enough, she watched it a billion times. There was like a month where she was watching it like almost every day. So I've seen it quite a bit.
When Princess and the Frog came out, I was in college and was like, it was fun. It was funny in a way that like, because I attended a historically Black university, so it's funny in a way because I know there was like a campaign um, led by like the Divine Nine and stuff that were like pushing people to like go like support this Black Disney movie. But I was like, I just can't be bothered. Like a Princess and the Frog tales, but like that's what they gave the Black princess, was a princess and she has to kiss a frog. Like I was not pressed about watching it.
That's so funny.
And I was just kind of like, I'll just wait. I guess I'll wait and see if like people were like what I hear from people. And then over time, nothing that I heard from people who'd watched it made me feel like, oh no, that's a must see. Like it was just like, oh okay, it sounds like another cute Disney story, cool. And I think I tried watching it. No, I know I tried watching it at least once. I just don't remember which year that was that I tried watching it, but I definitely tried watching it once. And this is my rule of thumb for any show or movie or whatever. If I try to watch it and I fall asleep on it, and I wasn't really tired, I just fall asleep on it, then I'm probably not going to end up watching it. It's just not going to happen. This is this is why I did not watch Star Wars the first time. Like I had a friend who was like really into Star Wars and was like, "Here, I'll lend you my DVDs." And I was like, "I'm so sorry to you in this universe. I tried to bring on these DVDs 3 different times, and each time it didn't happen." And I think because of that, every movie that I had that problem with, I just kind of give it a moment. So perhaps it'll be like Rogue One, like maybe later on. I was thinking maybe this book, when I first picked up this book, would be like how Rogue One was for me in Star Wars, and that like, when I watched Rogue One, I was like, oh, ooh, ooh. Let me go see the whole story roll out after this. Like, you mean this man just popped up on a ship and then just like what? Like the dark of it all at the end of Rogue One.
Yeah.
And then like into the whatever. So I was like, oh, I have to go see that like storyline and
The rest of it.
yeah. And so I was like thinking, oh, maybe when I picked up Almost There, this book, I was like, oh, maybe this will be my Rogue One, but for Princess and the Frog. Sadly, it was not. But I did really like the book when I read it. So I was like, this is enough for me. I don't really feel like I have to watch the movie because I'm fine with this book. It does probably more for me than a movie would have done because I feel like it just really is kind of like dealing with stuff that you deal with like a bit more as you're like growing into your adulthood. That is probably more, it's like more interesting to me as where I am currently in age than like where Princess and the Frog is in that story.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, if I didn't have Akira, I probably wouldn't have seen it as soon. Because I was in high school, so not that I didn't watch Disney movies, but I was never really a Disney girl in general, just because of like my parents. They never let us watch that stuff anyway. But like, obviously, it was a first Black princess, so it was a bigger deal. And like, I don't think I saw it in the theater. But again, once it was like out on, you could just watch it on like DVD or whatever. Like, yeah, my sister had it and watched it all the time, so I saw it or whatever. I feel like I mean, I liked it. I wasn't in the like. I feel like if it had hit me at a specific moment, it would have like caught me forever. Whereas like now, I'm more just like I like it. It's cool, but it's not like a doesn't hasn't didn't like get me by the
Yeah.
it
Yeah, you by the throat, like,
didn't
yeah,
get
this
me
is
and
you.
hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's also just a timing thing, not necessarily
Yeah.
like the movie's fault.
Yeah. I
Um.
felt something about this that I
So.
do kind of like Percy Jackson too. Like I'm like if I were the age demographic where Disney princesses were still like a thing, I'd have been the primary
Mhm.
audience. But sadly, I'm no longer there.
Yeah, and like it'd be that way sometimes. So based off that, did it when you were reading it, did it feel like you needed to have seen the movie to like understand and like enjoy the book?
Not really. I think that like and it's not annoying that it did this. It's something that was like a good aside or something that like keeps happening is that like they're on their journey and Tiana keeps having moments where she's like because of the deal that she's made, she keeps having moments being like, oh crap, like are these people starting to remember things they shouldn't be remembering because that's the deal she's made.
Mhm.
It's like made it where they're not supposed to remember stuff. And so she's kind of like she's not giving you the full story of what happened in the movie, but she's like recounting something that she felt during that time period or something that she observed during the time period of the movie. And so it's like, well, they shouldn't be remembering that because like that was whatever and whatever. And it kind of gives you that moment. It keeps having those kind of moments because people keep having
Yeah.
slowly remembering things. And because of that, I was like, oh, well, shoot. All right, I'm getting to recap every other chapter. Like, I'm fine.
Right. Yeah. That's real. Yeah. I felt like it did a pretty good job of like reminding you or telling you like what happened before without it feeling like info dumpy.
Hmm.
Um I did think, and we'll get into like characters and stuff later. I did feel like, at least for Tiana's character, having seen the movie,
Hmm.
her character development felt a little. I mean, we'll get to it. So that, like, I think it was more on the smaller things of like, not that you had to have read it before, but that I think it shifts your perspective when you're reading it, I guess, based on like whether you've seen the movie or not.
Hmm.
I will say too, I don't know why like, but I mean, I guess I just didn't like in my head, I thought that the deal would happen sooner in the um but like in the movie, I guess. So in
Hmm.
my head it was going to happen a lot earlier on, but that's just like something that I made up. I didn't like, I mean, I didn't feel like it was an expectation. I didn't completely know where like the twist was going to happen, but the fact that it happened at the end of the movie, I actually kind of liked cuz then it was more like a sequel. Although like it's still like the timeline is diverted, but it's like it's like the final like confrontation or whatever of the movie, and that's where things like diverge, so you get all of the I liked it in the sense of like you get all of the stuff that happened beforehand, and it's not like just a twist on those things, and it's not like a rehashing certain
Yeah.
things. So yeah,
It's like an
I thought that was cool.
AU of Tiana. Like, what would happen if.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but just in a later moment. So like, yeah.
I will say, like, as
Um,
much as we both were like agreed on that, like, it wasn't like it didn't feel like it was doing too much. There were some things like exposition wise that I think was like a little more in the first like 25%
mhm.
of the book than like it was in the latter parts, where it was like,
Yeah,
oh, like she felt this way because of this, and like we get to see from the POV of both like Naveen and Facilier, and there's things that they are thinking, then I'm like, it didn't feel kind of like natural in a way. Like it felt like it was kind of like
mm,
exposition to kind of help you get a better understanding of like why they're thinking or why they're doing what they're doing or whatever. And I'm like, it didn't,
yeah,
there's something about the way that it was like written that didn't feel like natural. But then as time goes on, like it's less so. But I did notice it
yeah.
whenever I was reading it that it was
I
kind of like it was a little
yeah,
heavy for me.
I mhm. I definitely agree with that. Any thoughts? I guess we kind of have been just talking about the setup and the way that they did it. I guess like the premise for those of y'all who have not read yet, without spoiling, it's basically Tiana makes a deal with Dr. Facilier. That's basically what the premise is. Like, what if she made a deal with him at the end of the movie as opposed to like defeating him or whatever? And so the thing, I think I will say the deal is a little. complicate like, it is and it's not a little convoluted because there's just a lot of, like, different pieces to it.
Because yeah, because like a facility, it's not real. It's weird because the deal is with Facilier, but the deal that actually works on Tiana and her circumstances is like using Facilier as a vessel. And there's another
Mhm.
aspect of the deal that is just Facilier throwing his own little crap into it and trying to make Tiana like believe that it's all one big deal when it's actually him throwing his own motives into
Right.
what was the actual deal.
But I think it's also, like, it's the pieces of it, right? Like, he offers or initially it's like, "I'll bring your dad back,"
And I'll
which is,
give
like,
you
the
a
big
restaurant,
thing.
but then he
And then it's like, "And I'll give
rejects
you a
that.
restaurant." And she says she spoilers, she turns down both of those things. And then it's when he threatens Naveen and is like, he'll never, like, become human again, is when she, like, agrees, but she agrees to all of that. So she gets all of those things, um, in exchange for, like, putting this potion in her food, which is crazy. Imagine if she had gotten found out that she was putting some weird
But she also like,
thing.
but we just because she's like she's again we're led to believe is for her putting the potion in the food, where it's actually more at play than the potion.
Mhm.
So it's like really
Right,
interesting.
and so
Yeah.
yeah, and the potion is supposed to, like, make people more agreeable so that Facilier can, like, swindle them.
Hmm.
Most notably, he's trying to get at, Mr. LaBeouf, who's, like, the most powerful dude in the city or whatever. Um, but he tells her that it's to keep her, like, dad alive, basically.
Hmm.
And then eventually then he finds out that, like, the deal that was made, he misunderstood, and we can talk about him too. I feel like it's very interesting the way that they kind of or the way that she, like, expands on his character, and, like, more of his perspective, I guess, is more accurate. Um,
Is it more in the movie? Is he just kind of like a one note villain that pops up with like shadows, or?
I wouldn't I mean, I feel like he's a classic Disney villain, right? They have, like, one motive. He's got his friends on the other side. He's using that to, like, get power, right? And so it's not that this story isn't doing that. I think because it delves a little bit deeper into his friends on the other side and what they want and how that relationship actually works.
Hmm.
Like, you kinda get the idea in the movie that his friends are not like, he is beholden to them,
Hmm.
but not so much but you don't get a lot of it, you know what I mean? Like, you don't completely see I think you don't really get like, I think in the book, it plays up or shows more of his desperation,
Hmm.
and why he's so desperate,
Hmm.
um, in a way that you just don't have as much time in a movie to, like, delve into,
Hmm.
um, so, yeah, so I thought that that was, like, interesting. It just added again, it just kept adding, like, more aspects, I guess, of the deal, and then, like, then when things start to go to crap, then it's like, what's actually trying to figure out, like, what's actually at play here and, like, who's actually behind it.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting.
I think it was, yeah, I think that was, I was wondering that. Like, I wondered how big, well, the book played into, um, like, actually, like, by giving him POV in the story, like, actually kind of like diving a bit more, into a backstory than like what you may have probably been able to get in a runtime of a movie. Because they don't
Mhm.
usually, I mean, unless like it's like a sequel
I
movie, like
mean,
Return of Jafar, where you get a bit more like backstory. Like, I don't really think that
yeah.
villains tend to get that much backstory in most of the Disney movies.
Yeah, he didn't really get a backstory. I'd say that, like, I think it made sense to me that Facilier and Naveen had, like, perspective chapters or whatever, just because, like, in the movie, there are moments where, like, you're gonna see the villain on his own and,
Hmm.
like, doing his big song. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, you have those moments where, like, you are only seeing from their perspective, so I think it made sense to, like, sprinkle those in even though the story is largely Tiana's story.
Hmm.
And yeah, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was also a good way of especially for Facilier, right? Like, he's such a intimidating and, like, Yeah, he's such an intimidating character and, like, terrifying character to Tiana, and she thinks that he has a lot more power than he does, and so showing his perspective shows the reader that he doesn't have as much like, he's actually flailing, but from Tiana's perspective, he's, like, this big, like, just, like, all-powerful dude,
Mhm.
um, and but as we're watching it, we know we're just like, "This man is not, like" he really ain't shit, actually.
He's not in
He's
control of
just good
everything
at
he's
making
doing. Yeah.
no, he's just good at making it seem like he is, and
Yeah.
so watching that happen on, like, both sides is really interesting too.
Yeah, I think my question that I have is gonna tie in with the world building question. When How well did you feel that the story did with giving you a sense of the time period? Like, it's a historical fiction because this takes place
Mhm.
during recon
It's like
well,
1907
no,
no, 19
1912 into like 1920.
yeah,
Because 1912 is where we start off. It's like the prologue where Tiana is like a young girl. Yes, it's 1926. The
yeah.
actual runtime of the story um is in 1926, but this is like this is prime like Jim Crow era, like New
Mhm,
Orleans and like US. um
mhm,
and there's like while there's like the social components of that, there's also the like technological like things that were happening within the time period that are very solidly in the time period, streetcars operating the way they do, the
mhm.
pricing of things, stuff like that. So I feel like, like there you see there's it's enough interaction with Tiana's life that you kind of get an idea of the time period. But like how did you feel how well do you feel like that was conveyed throughout the story?
I felt like I will also preface by saying that I've been doing a lot of research on, like, Black history in general, not necessarily in the 20s, actually, like, earlier than that,
Hmm.
but that also kinda colors my reading of it because, like, it's the
You know
20s, right? And
what
so
it's coming from. Yeah.
what it's coming from exactly,
Yeah.
and so for me, it was just very Disney, right? Because obviously you watch the movie and it's definitely taking the aesthetic of the 20s and, like, New Orleans and kind of just leaving it there, and, like, I think that when you watch it as a movie, it's less, um
Jarring or an issue
yeah, and
possibly.
just less stark, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you're just kinda like, "Okay, fine, it's Disney, we're
Hmm.
singing songs, now we're frogs, we're in the bayou." Like, "Okay,
This is all
whatever."
mad
You know what
time.
I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, it's like, I'm not, like, here you know what I mean? But because this story focuses like, Tiana is human the entire time, she's in New Orleans the entire time, you know what I mean? Like, she's interacting with people, she's, in her restaurant, she's doing all of this stuff the whole time, it makes it a little bit more, like, it just feels like it's missing, and it's not that the author doesn't address those things, and I think that she has moments where she addresses them, like the department store, and, like, that, like, part that scene or whatever is, like, a story that I've been told by my grandmother about something that happened to her, about, like, her mom and grandmother, so, like, it's, like, a familiar story, I would say,
Mhm.
but, um it just doesn't go and, like, I'm not saying it as if, like, I need it to be, like, super traumatic and it needs to, like, be super, like, dark and heavy and whatever. I'm not even saying it in that way. It just felt like I was waiting for a long time for her to just, like, say explicitly that Tiana was, like, Black and dealt with, like, you know what I mean? It was, like, certain hints where it was just kinda vague of, like, "Oh, yeah, she has to deal with these things." You know what I mean? Or she has to, like, her, like, dream location for her restaurant gets sold to someone else because of, like, these racist white dudes or whatever. But it's not, like, explicitly said, it's just kind of, like, hinted or not even hinted. It just you have to kind of, like, read between the lines. Or it's said, but it's kind of like you if you know, you know, I guess is maybe the better way to say it. Um, and I would also say, especially with Lottie,
Yeah.
I think that's where my,
Where
like
it's the most incongruent. It's the most like,
yeah, because 'cause I'm just like, "Okay, so you're at the department store
mhm.
and you're taking" first of all, Lottie is, Mr. LaBeouf's daughter, so she's, like, extremely wealthy. Her best friend is or Tiana is her best friend, but they know each other because Tiana's mom
It's worked for her.
was making her clothes and was working for her. So like just even that, the like power dynamics, like you don't recognize that, or even the fact that like, and they have a conversation about it at some point,
Mm-hmm.
but it just feels like, it felt very, what it is, you know what it is, it felt very like 21st century. That's what the conversations felt like, where it
Mm-hmm.
was just like, yeah, I could, like, I would roll my eyes, but I could believe that like some wealthy or like at least well off white kid wouldn't necessarily understand the differences in between, like if they had like a black best friend who had, was living in a less, or just living in like a poorer neighborhood, whatever, had different like financial situations, I could believe that they would be a little bit more like aloof or like not necessarily understand the differences,
Mm-hmm.
just by nature of like how our society is right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 20s, you don't know that black women can't try on clothes in a department store. Like, you don't
Yeah.
know that, like, those are the things where I was just like, why is she having to educate her on this when she's like, when like these laws and these things are very explicit. I think that's where I was just like
Yeah.
confused.
I feel like I could like it was only partially under believable in that she is so privileged and she's so used to getting her way that it was like, how dare you tell me how dare you tell me who I can put a hat on, kind of thing. Like, how dare, you know what I mean?
Sure, except I'm like, they're what, like almost 20?
Yeah. No, I
And
get what
like,
you're like. I'm
and
with
like, you
you.
know what I mean? So it was like,
Yeah.
I
I'm
got
saying
it.
the only thing
Yes, it
that
was
they
a
gave
very
me
white
only the
woman moment
hint.
of a like, how dare you, like,
Yeah.
I'm about to call the manager type situation.
Yeah.
And that like reaction was believable. It just, to me, wasn't believable in the 20s, I
Yeah.
guess, is kind of
Oh
what
no, I'm
I
not.
was
I'm like, the
feeling.
only way I could see this like going forward is if like she literally was like, "You're attacking my privilege, and that's what I can't stand for." You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
how dare you?
Right. But
Um,
her just being shocked that it was happening at all. I would
happening at
also
all?
say
Yeah,
there is no explicit mention of slavery either.
yeah,
And like Tiana's parents, at the very least, were born in slavery,
yeah.
if not like, you know what I mean? It could have been like at like right at
Yeah.
like during
Emancipation.
emancipation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it's not like, again, it felt like some of those moments felt like it was being written from the perspective of somebody in the 21st century, as opposed to someone who has a very close and like direct line to that.
Hmm.
And so I think those were the moments, like the story overall I really enjoyed, but I think those were the moments that I was just like, I'm not fully connecting to it because of that.
Yeah, I think for me, I like, as you said earlier, like I attribute it to the Disney of it all, where like there is Disney gonna actually
Right. Yeah. No.
no, you know,
Not at all. Not at all. And
Disney.
that's why I was
Yeah,
like, I'm feeling this, but I also recognize what it is. So I
yeah,
can't like, I'm not mad at it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's like, this isn't surprising, but as I'm reading it, I'm just like, if it wasn't Disney, if it was a completely separate story, I
yeah,
would want
yeah.
more from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you on that as well. And then I think general like those are the parts that took me out, like time period wise. And I think there were just some things that I was like, socially, I just think were just so like awesome. Like
Mhm.
and and that's the thing about writing, is that you don't want to be like getting into nitty gritties of all the things, like going down a rabbit hole of like where were the restrooms, and you know what I mean, like that kind of crap.
Right.
But it was interesting, like in that like there was some of the stuff like where Tiana was just like roaming the docks or whatever, talking to the fishermen and stuff. And I'm like, sure, yeah, she could do that or whatever. But I just feel like this all like the level of relationship she had with people was just a little bit like, it just like them, like the mannerisms that would be in that time period were just a little like not that time period. It was more 21st century
Mhm.
kind of like mannerisms and like customs than it would be like, like she takes her hair down in front of a man, and like, you know what I
Right.
mean? And I'm just like, I don't think you would be doing. Actually, don't even think your hair would be down. I think, or like in like you would have to like do multiple steps to get your hair down, because that's just like,
Mhm.
So I'm just like, and I know, but I also remember again Disney and the movie and how she styled in the movie or whatever, or at least from the shots that I've seen of her, and I'm like, they
Yeah.
weren't really trying to
It's very
consider what she
simple.
actually looks like. Yeah.
It's very it was very simple. Yeah. So yeah, I think the time period was the most where like I think the aesthetic of it and the like
Art
um
Deco and like
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I thought that that was like spot on. I thought that
Mhm.
that made sense, but there was definitely yeah, it was very Disney. It was Disney New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I also think again, I think that it being a book is what like made it
More apparent.
more more apparent cuz I think if this had been a movie, I wouldn't have like really thought about it. Not and like, you know what I mean? It's Disney,
You're like,
whatever. You know
"Whatever."
what I mean? Like I was just like I
But
wouldn't
you're like,
it
you're in
wouldn't
the
have
middle of reading a
been
book and you're like, "Wait a minute, it's Disney.
I'm
Okay."
like this can't happen. But like yeah, it's interesting to me though that like the medium matters or
Yeah.
like changes the perspective, I
But I
guess.
also think it's like I
Um
think it's but is that also on you as a reader? Like as readers, we have certain expectations for the stories that we read, you know?
mhm.
And it's
And I
like,
think the level of like detail.
yeah. But I feel like if like maybe if you were a person who were in when you were more of a movie watcher than you were a reader and you just wanted to pick up this cute tie-in to a movie that you like, then maybe
Mhm.
it wouldn't phase you. Like, you know what I mean? Like your primary
Yeah.
time is spent reading other books
I
set in
also
this time
think
period or whatever.
yeah, I also think if I probably had watched the movie right before reading the book, I may have also had a different perspective on that too.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I've seen the movie recently. I
Yeah.
remember it, like, I know the plot and stuff, but I think that, like, the feeling of that, I think, would have carried over.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm like, "What did I read before this?" Some fantasy, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like I'm reading, like, nonfiction and fantasy right now, so, like, it's in the and again, if I'm reading nonfiction, like history books and
Yeah.
fantasy, and then I'm coming to this historical fiction,
Yeah.
like, it's just my brain is in a different place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that it's a really the fault of the book because it
Yeah.
is what it's, advertised to be,
Yeah.
um, but it's just like, you know,
it's hard
where you
because
are when
like
you read it.
I can imagine what we get as the final product being like the furthest Disney was willing to go. And I don't know how much
Sure.
the author
Yeah.
pushed and for more and it was just like no. Or if it was just
Mhm.
that like we are all in agreement, okay, yeah, this is where we're gonna go. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And I'm like,
Right.
that's fine. That's I get it.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't blame the author at all.
Yeah.
It's like I completely understand
Yeah.
what this is and,
Yeah.
like, what it was meant to be, and, like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like
I'm like, I knew the premise, I picked it up, I bought it, it's fine,
Yeah.
we're good.
I'm like,
Um,
"It's Princess and the Frog." We
yeah,
yes.
we're here. The only other thing that had world building wise that I wanted to probe on was and this will kind of whatever we'll talk. These questions will go where they go. Where
Mhm.
what did you think was happening with in the story? We're gonna get into the characters in a minute. There's this woman who's mysterious and but she's mysterious but friendly. And she's
Mhm.
always giving Tiana like flowers. She's a florist, and then also paintings. And she's always saying they're gifts, and not to worry about them. And um, Tiana's already been feeling as if she's being watched from the shadows. And then when she
Mhm.
starts noticing weird things happening with the flowers and paintings, because she takes them all to her restaurant and she notices when she changes them out and stuff like that, that weird thing, like just weird things keep happening with these things. So question one was what did you think was happening with those flowers and paintings and stuff? What do you think had to do with that
Mhm.
character? And then also the same, how did you feel about what did you think was happening with there's this like strange fog that has rolled
Yeah.
into New Orleans and continues to grow each
Mhm.
day. And like a day or two after the fog comes in, then there also seems to be this weird algae that grows and like takes over the dock, starts creeping into the city. So what did you think was happening with all like one with this character who was giving Tiana this free stuff that was doing weird things, and then also with
Mhm.
the actual like change up of New Orleans with this weird
Yeah.
creeping growth of like darkness starts coming
I
in.
uh so with Miss Rose, I felt like I knew she was something else. Like I knew it was not just she's not just some random like just some friendly woman. I was like she's involved somehow. I felt like we could trust her. Like it for some reason it didn't feel like she was sinister in any type
Yeah.
of way. It didn't feel like Tiana was like falling for another, you know, like falling for the okie doke or whatever. It felt
Hmm.
like no, she's clearly trying to help her in some way, but like it's not clear with what or like how much she knows and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um The one thing about Tiana, though, I was like, okay, so you've been turned into a frog. You have you met Mama Odie. You've been talking to Louis. Louis is now human. He was born a gator and now he's human. You have this deal with Facilier. Your father is brought back to life. Like you have all of these evidence, all this
what was
evidence
the
of magic.
bug that was like a mosquito? Was it like a lightning bug or something
Oh,
she was friends with?
oh my god. He's mentioned at the
In the
beginning,
very
but
beginning, yeah. But he's gonna give us time to the
yeah, the lightning
story.
bug. Oh,
But
I
I'm just
love
saying
him.
she
I
was
can't remember
actually
his name off the top of my
friends and
head.
could conversate with a whole bug.
With the lightning bug.
Yeah.
Literally. So it's like all these things. And for her to like see the flowers wilting too fast or like people leaving the paintings or all these kinds of things, and she just keeps like brushing it off as her being tired. I'm like, you have physical like and like you like evidence of magic existing in your world and you're just like brushing these things off as like you're gaslighting yourself. That's what that was like the
Right.
one thing I was like, ma'am, it's one thing if you have never seen anything like this before and you're just like, okay, I must be tripping, like sure, fine, but you have seen these things. And so I just feel like you need to ask more questions. If you're like, hey, Miss Rose, why are these paintings like, I just, that part was kind of like, girl,
For me and I wrote
something's going on.
Here's my thing. So and the lightning bug's name is Ray. I looked at it real quick.
Yes,
I found it. Yeah,
Ray.
My thing is, and I noted this because I thought it was so. People have talked about this a lot. This is why I know this in osmosis, I guess. Tiana being heavily Capricorn coded. And I like am so like here with this as a reasoning for what her zodiac sign is, because she really is heavily Capricorn coded. I can't not see her as a Capricorn. And it was the way that she was trying to be so reasonable. Like she was trying to rationalize everything. And I was
again,
like, and I feel like
if you had not been turned into a frog
you
a
have
year
seen
ago,
magic,
then I'd be like, sure.
Rational explanation in this case is magic.
But you were literally a frog.
You're trying, right? You're doing the most and not being like, this is not magic. You know, like she didn't say it was not magic. She just was like in her brain, she was just like, well, that is straight. Something's at work here. But I don't have time to think about this. I have work to do. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like why are you putting work? And it's because she's Capricorn. Why do you keep putting work ahead of you actually like going and like questioning and interrogating and actually doing anything about the stuff that you like is creeping you out? Like low key, this stuff is creeping you out, and you're trying to, and I get it, you're trying to put a barrier between what is scaring you and like your actual responsibilities, and so you use your responsibilities to keep out what's scaring you. But my guy, my lady,
sometimes you just got to go ahead and be like, okay, this is what's happening. And Miss Rose, clearly she'd be saying random stuff, she's giving you these things. Ask her. She might tell you something real vague and riddly or whatever,
and
but at least
like,
ask.
And I could see that deterring her. I'm like, because like that would deter me. Like, because like if I'm like, oh, look, you're seeing me because I'm on errands. Like every time she sees Miss Rose, she's doing an errand in the market or something. She's like she's getting in and out, and she just happens to run into Miss Rose, and Miss Rose takes a minute to her at her side. If every time I see you, I got somewhere else to be, but here you are giving me a thing and then being vague about it, then why am I like, you want me to have a full conversation and I ain't got the time. I do not have the time.
That's real. She just needed to seek her out at the point where she did have the time. But let's get into that. Tiana and not having time.
Oh, but the algae. How did you feel about the algae and the
algae? I liked that. I liked that part as like a thing. It was just being like this creepy thing that's coming and everyone's trying to be like, I don't know, maybe
that was what was killing
maybe
me.
It's the swamp.
It was like everyone in the city. I was like, no one's gonna be like, hey, maybe she's some scientists out here to investigate what this stuff is. Like, should we I don't know, someone know anything about dealing with rolling fog? You can't even like, what are we gonna do? Like nobody, no one's going to...
as a Bay Arean, thick fog, I would definitely be like, whatever. Like, I get it. Like, I drive in fog all the time and I'm just like, this is crazy, but you know.
But you have a modern day car. They over here talking about walking down the streets.
In the trolley, literally.
She almost got hit by a Model T.
When she was going home, I was like, this is problematic.
Yes.
Like, you can't just be
And she's
walking
already
around a
afraid
dog. You
of
can't see.
shadows scurrying in the back.
Bro,
Like, I'm like, is this not?
no.
And this is, I loved how, like, my love of horror and gothic, and I
Mhm.
was like, oh, this is so fun for me.
I just knew something terrible was gonna happen, and then I kept, again, having to remind myself that it's a Disney book, so I was just like, "Okay, it's
How
not gonna be that
terrible can it
bad. It's
be?
fine."
Yeah,
But I just kept thinking, like, not that I was scared in the moment, but I was just like, "This is going to get worse," kinda
yeah.
thing, you know what I mean? Like,
It's like,
this is
it
about to
gets
get
better.
scary,
Yeah,
and then it wouldn't, and I was like, "Oh, right, 'cause, yes,
yeah.
I remember what I'm reading now." But in any other book, it would've turned into some other stuff, and I would've been like, "No, thank you."
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike Big Wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Here on Wizard Team, it's no surprise that we love books. We also love supporting the independent bookstores.
With our bookshop affiliate link, you can not only get all the books on your TBR, but you can support indie bookstores and B&C at the same time.
And if you're not sure what you want, that ain't no problem. Check out our The Plot Thickens list full of recommendations from none other than Porshèa herself.
Head to www.bookshop.org/shop/blacknerdscreate to treat your shelves.
Treat your shelves.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Oh
clever.
my goodness.
That's clever. So yeah, Tiana, I felt like, so I will say, I feel like, I think at the beginning of the story, I was wondering, it kind of felt like her character development had like regressed.
Mhm.
But I think I changed my mind as it went on. So like, because in the movie, the whole thing is like she's working too hard. She doesn't like go out and, have fun because she's putting all of her time and effort and energy into like saving money to buy this building. And then, she's also like heavily independent. She's just like, I got it. I'm doing the thing. And part of her like character development through that story is that she eventually like learns how to have fun and like unwind and all that kind of stuff. Um so at the beginning of this one, like once the deal was made and she has her restaurant with her dad and she's just kind of like working all the time and again not really interacting with people, not really like, at first I was just like, okay, this is kind of weird because it feels like it undid what she like learned in the movie. But as I was going, I kind of felt like, okay, I kind of get it in the sense of like she got this restaurant, her father's back. She like is also still like heartbroken over Naveen and the fact that he can't remember her or anything of like what happened, and that she can't like,
Talk to
one
anyone
of
about
the
it.
like terms of the deal was that she couldn't tell anyone about it, and also she couldn't talk to him about it. Like she couldn't go back to him, and if he remembered things he would turn back into a frog is what she was told. I understand the sense of like, I'm gonna just focus, put my head down and work so I don't have to like think about those things. Um and also the idea of like making that deal with Facilier like isolated her. And so in her head, she can't ask for help because she's in this deal with Facilier. She has to handle it all herself. And so then it kind of like I said, like as I was reading, I was like, oh, okay, never mind. Like this makes sense to me in the context of like what she like agreed to, and then just feeling like she had to bear all of that on her
Mhm.
own. And I think it also maybe goes into why she didn't ask Miss Rose about the weird like flowers and paintings and stuff, because it's like, again, I gotta work, I gotta focus on what I'm focusing on so that I don't like become upset about things. And I want to like, and I think she was also trying to spend as much time as she could with her dad. Like she
Yeah.
had missed all of that time. And so um yeah, I think by like, I would say like maybe before halfway through, but like after the beginning of it, I was kind of like, okay, no, I see what's happening with her, I guess.
Yeah, I think that my thing with Tiana was, okay, so with Capricorn in my chart the way that it is, I like heavily related with like not like it was interesting that everyone around her kind of took her hyper independence as like her not having faith in their ability to help. And it wasn't that she didn't have faith in them. It was that she was like, I got everything together. I've got it. It's together in my brain.
Yeah.
I've got it together. And I'm gonna knock them out the way that I see it. I got it. And it was interesting to me, talking about her spending time with her father. It was interesting to me that like she has these like memories of like cooking with her father, and yet none of the scenes with her and her father in the kitchen together are they like chef sous chef where he's like one of them's prepping, the other one's
Right.
putting, you know what I mean? It's like she
Yeah.
puts the gumbo together, then she puts the beignets together, and then while she's worried about the
And like
beignets,
he's doing things, but
things.
she's like, yeah, but she's definitely taking most of it on.
Yeah.
And then it's also like the question of like, and I think it gets brought up kind of earlier where it's like, you know, she's talking about wanting to expand, but it's like you can't be in 1,000 places at once.
Yeah, her mom's
you
like,
gotta hire other people to do this thing.
Her mom was like, you need to hire another chef because so you can actually
Yeah.
like do those things. And she's like this is like the 30th time my mom has said this or whatever, but I would sooner do this and that. And then I think like a paragraph later or something, her mom says someone said something about like something the other thing that came up, and Tiana was like, I would rather hire a chef before I'd ever do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're ridiculous.
She's just like, it's just the hyper independence.
Yeah.
And again, I understand where it came from and like why she's like that, but it was definitely like, ma'am, please.
And also she's like trying to
like,
be
just
protective of people when her like she's like, if I do it, then like my mom and dad get some more time. You know, she's like, she keeps having these things where she's like, well, I'm protecting them. Like none of them know what the deal that I've made with Facilier, and I don't want them to have to like, you know, worry about it. She keeps doing stuff like that.
And it's like it's guilt too.
Yeah.
It's definitely guilt and just feeling like
they would be
I'm
ashamed
responsible
of
for
her.
this. So
yeah, if they knew about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of different things. And I felt like by the end she got there. I think I wanted to see more of it like in the end. I think there were like parts of her asking for help or parts of people being like, look, I got it type situation. But I'm thinking of like specifically there's a moment where she like yells at Louis and it felt like, okay, at this point you probably just in the story, you know, like we maybe need to be, you know, accepting help at this point. But I didn't feel like by the end, like I do think by the end she got there, but I think it just like there were a couple of moments towards the end where I was like, girl.
I think that was I honestly like for your thing, like for two things. For you saying like it was like you're worried about there being a regression initially or whatever. I think that it makes sense in a way of that like as humans we tend to do the things that we're comfortable doing, and if she just kind of like had just learned her lesson at the end of the movie in Princess and the Frog and like that ending got diverted, then she was fully still trying, like she still needed
she's not there all the way.
Yeah, she was because she just really, like,
and I think especially because a big part of her learning that is through her like interactions with Naveen and through their like developing relationship. So then in the point of that she's like learning it and then she loses him. Like I could totally, you know what I mean? Like it makes sense that she would be like, well, never mind, back to my little hole.
And then also I think it was also
back to my bullshit. Like that makes sense to me.
I know how to do this. I don't know how to navigate this weird relationship where I can't talk to him, but I do know how to overwork myself. I can do that.
Exactly. I'm on it. Say less.
I think the other thing is that like with when she blew up at Louis, I think it came from like when she's anxious, when she's stressed, and she doesn't have the answer. And that moment she didn't have the answer. She was trying to seek out the answer, but she didn't have the answer.
Yeah.
And that just, I think that was honestly a reflection of her stressing out. It just came out of that moment at Louis, and it was like, bro, like, and she apologizes
and I
later.
also will say, she apologizes, and again, she does better after that. But I would also say, even before that, there's a moment where she's freaking out.
Yeah.
And but Naveen like peeps and is able to like be like, look, I'll handle this. You go do the other thing or whatever. So that I think that is also, you know, it's an important part of the relationship, right?
Yeah. Before we get off of Tiana, I do like, but I have a thought about partially about how, perhaps her lack of wanting to self-care is
Mhm.
related to her perception of Lottie, which I feel like we get us into a whole Lottie
Mm.
conversation. Before we go there, I just wanted to say it here so I
Yeah.
didn't lose that thought. Um,
Yeah.
one of my notes when I was reading the book was that one of the reasons that I felt Tiana made for an interesting fantasy character is that she has no interest in magic at all. Like she
Yeah.
doesn't see magic and she's like, oh, that's intriguing. How can I get on the magic? She's just like,
Right. She said, "Nope, I gotta work.
no, no,
I don't have time for that.
no, keep it over.
Need to
No.
make this gumbo."
And so the her trying to reason herself out of strangeness instead of like immediately being like, it's magic, let me like try to
Right.
like, it's
Figure it out.
it makes for a fun character too as a main character,
Mhm.
because she's not like a main character trying to like gain magic or use magic to her advantage. She's just like, get me out of here, I made this
Right.
deal.
She
Yeah,
only addresses it at the point where like she realizes she has no other choice.
yeah. And then even
For
then
the most
she's
part,
like,
she's like she sees these strange things and she's like, "No, I'm gonna
yeah,
focus. I'm gonna put my head down. I'm gonna do my thing. It'll be fine."
she, because of her hard-headedness around magic, she was unable to interpret the messages from the spirits that they were trying to give her through the flowers and the paintings, because they were trying to
Right.
warn her. Can you imagine
Yeah.
being an ancestor trying to warn one of your descendants and they're like, what the F is this? Who's trying to threaten me? What
It's
is
just
that?
not
And
even,
you're just like, child, I'm
ma'am.
trying to tell you that something is coming for you. And you're
Something
trying
is
to act
afoot.
like I'm the problem. I'm the problem?
Ah.
How about you actually care about these things? Like, that's what got me about Tiana. She's like a non-fantasy character put into a fantasy setting.
Yeah.
And she's just like,
Mhm.
what is this? Get me out of here kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious, but it's also sad, deeply sad, because it's like they're trying to help you and it's going over your head because
Not
you just
even, yeah.
refusing to interact with it. So that was my final thought about Tiana and magic, was that like, girl, really, like, seriously. And we don't learn about that until she finally has a conversation.
Yeah. Exactly. Just very much like, nope, I got my restaurant. I'm avoiding Naveen. This is all I can do. So Naveen, I feel like he gets his memory wiped, essentially. He doesn't remember anything that happened in the events of The Princess and the Frog. But it's like his brain doesn't remember it, but like, or I guess so in the back of his mind, they're still in there. The
Yeah,
memories are
his
still there.
subconscious
He just can't
is
access them.
still having, like, whatever his personal growth journey was in the movie still set itself in
It's
his subconscious, because
exactly.
he moves with the feel, like the development of what he
Uh-huh.
actually received in the movie.
Right. Like he's like, okay, I need to, like, he recognizes the value of hard work. He's trying to like prove himself as more than just like the spoiled prince. And he's like already in love with Tiana, has no idea why. She's been avoiding him. To his recollection, he's never had a conversation with her. And he's just like, no, but this is the girl for me. And like, she's hurting my feelings because every time she sees me, she runs away.
I loved it. I'm sorry. I loved it. I just she came out with
It's
a whole
so
tray
funny,
of food. It was like, oh,
bro.
whoop, 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 I'm a
Nope, gotta go.
what, what?
I'm out. To the point that Lottie's like, "Are you avoiding me? Like, what's going on?" Because Lottie and Naveen are like friends at this point. Like in the movie, Lottie spends a lot of the time like she wants to marry a prince. So there's this whole thing about like her wanting to marry Naveen, but it's not real Naveen; it's a fake one. And then they like actually get to know each other, and they're like, "Nah, we'll just be friends. It's fine." But
And then in this book,
yeah,
she's just like, I decided that a princess is too much, but a duchess, I'm gonna set my sights.
right,
Like, as if it's so easy to find a duke, but at the same
girl, I
time,
do right.
it's a fictional
She's just
world, so like, I don't know what
maybe.
I've heard romance authors talk about there being like a duke equation or something, like there's always whatever duke for whatever for in a like fictional world. I don't remember hearing the
Mm,
whole thing out. Someone looked that up, but it was just funny that I'm like, it's it's so funny that she's like, oh, I don't think I, a rich girl in the Americas where there's no one with titled land, gentry here, am going to
Right.
actually go from prince to duke. Like, how does that even actually happen?
How does she's not a serious
She's
person.
not.
And that's okay. Like that's actually her character is that she's not
Yes.
serious. um but yeah. I feel like I really liked that Naveen didn't like complete like it wasn't like they had to go through their like courtship or whatever all over again.
Yeah.
Um
And even if Naveen didn't remember, Tiana did, and she was reacting to him
yeah.
because she knew that sparks fly when she's with him. So she's like avoiding him.
Mhm.
She's like, oh crap! Like every time I'm around him, like my body
I
is doing
can't.
things and I can't pull it
Right.
together. Yeah.
And as it goes on, they spend more time together and she's like falling into it, right? And then she has to keep reminding herself, "Oh shit, I'm not supposed to be doing this." Like and then that, and also from his perspective it's confusing because she's like hot and cold and like
Yeah.
he's like, "I think she likes me. I'm pretty sure, but something is holding her back and I'm not really sure what." And like, he's like, they're yeah, again, he's in love with her. So before they even really have a real conversation, he's just like, "No, this is."
He's like,
And
I
I and
know
I
that we're already married in my brain. Like I know that we're
right,
together
literally.
forever in my brain. So I don't know
And
why
I
you're
and
being
I
so weird about
I
it.
kind of love that cuz I always
Yeah.
love like, I love male love interests who are down bad
Yeah.
for the female
It's my
love
favorite
interest. Like
thing.
that's
Yeah.
it's the best thing. Like that's
Yeah.
how it should be. So I was like, this is great. I'm loving it. I also yeah, I mean I liked getting more of his perspective. I liked the of him just wanting to like prove himself, but also interesting like Tiana still inspires him in that way too, like even though he doesn't it's and at this point from what he like knows is just from watching her from afar, like he's
Yeah.
been to a restaurant multiple times and like sees how hard she works and how much she like puts into it, and so that like makes him want to do that too, and not just so that he can like show off to her but really for himself. And yeah, so I thought that was interesting. I also again like we mentioned like the moment where she was like freaking out and he kind of like calmed her. I also liked those moments of like showing that he understands what's going on in her head.
Hmm.
Even if he doesn't have like the full context for why she's freaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that, like, so I think for Tiana, and this is coming from my own experience to an extent, I feel like for Tiana, a lot of her feedback she's getting from her parents about she needs to sit down and take time to herself kind of goes, she hears them, but she also doesn't all really hear them because she's like,
Mhm.
rest for when I'm dead, basically. So she's just like,
Yeah.
that's when I'll, like, got you, sure, yeah, I'll rest, I'll dance, sure. Um, and I think it's when she continues to hear that from Lottie, but also she's grown up and she's seen what Lottie sees as like self care, and she's just like, that's a lot of rich white people stuff. That's not what I can do as a
Mhm.
working Black woman who's trying to get her business off. Um, and then for Naveen, him being like a spoiled rich prince, and he's coming through, and he's also being like, hey, like I can legit like take on this instead of you. Like you can take a moment, and
Mhm.
it's only after he says it overtly, then he like says it like quietly, and then he just kind of like shows that he's capable in other ways. So she's like, okay, maybe I'll let you do this for me. And it
Mhm.
takes, so I like that in their relationship, that again, because she remembers where they ended up, she's kind of that like area of like her knowing that he's competent and capable. It's just that she has to let go of the will. She just can't, she has a problem letting go of the will. And even despite the
Mhm.
fact that he can't remember, he still remembers enough to know how to get through to her when she's having those moments where she's just not able to let go, and he's patient
Mhm.
enough to like work with her through it. I just think that's a really like cool part of the relationship, and I think she knows that people trying to tell her to take time for herself is people caring for her, but for her to
Mhm.
have that from someone who's not related to her or it didn't grow up with her and like is someone she has romantic feelings for, is very sweet, and Naveen is very sweet about it, and I really enjoyed that from him as well.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, okay, one other thing about Lottie. It's not even about her, it's about her dad. Just slightly going back to our conversation about, like, time period and stuff.
Mhm.
He's a sugar baron.
Yeah. He literally had to have owned
Su
or enslaved people and
His
or
or
his
if even
parents
he didn't,
ahead of
his
him.
parents.
Yeah.
And, like, sugar plantations? Are you kidding me?
The
Like, if
worst.
like, where are you getting the sugar from? Like, they're actually, like,
The
the
worst.
worst. And that's the thing, like,
And
again,
when Naveen
having
was
read
talking
and
to a
having, like,
worker
had this.
there, I was like, is this worker a white worker? Because I can't see
Well,
a
so my
black
thing
worker
is like
having
what
this.
they're doing. But what they're doing is like in the mill, which not is
Yeah.
not that that's like a not a hard job, but I could see like at that point, yeah, sure, maybe some white folks. I'm thinking about like where you're getting the sugar from. You're still getting those from
Yeah, no,
plantations,
I'm with you on that.
and
I was
like
just like, I remember
yeah,
Naveen talking like that. My brain was just like, wait a minute, are we supposed to be thinking that Naveen is talking? Is this man like, is he helping a black man get a step up? Because
right,
what is
or this white dude,
happening?
yeah,
Right,
it wasn't
that
clear,
wasn't clear.
and I think it's hard for me. Again, it's a book, so it's harder, and it's not. It's Disney, so my expectations are what they are, but that was also a thing for me where I was like, has a very this is like a huge history, especially like in this region
Area, yeah,
and like very dark traumatic history for black
yeah.
folks in that region.
And he is just
And
holding
it's
court in
just
Tiana's restaurant every night.
every night Lottie is like out here not knowing that black women can't try on stuff in the department store. So it was just like that part, it was difficult for me
Also, like
to
I like the
fully
conversation. I thought I said I was done with Lottie, but the conversation
yeah.
that Tiana had with Lottie that felt like a 21st century conversation. Yeah, maybe I'll give it 20th century almost, but that's what this is 20th. But like it's like it's right there on the line. Is that
Mhm.
like when she's like, why do you say you're my friend and that you want to support me and stuff? You have a father who's very very rich who could you could easily have asked him to help support me in my efforts. And she's like, well, I knew that you would not take a handout. Sure, but also he could have been the facilitator between a conversation between the guys who owned the place that I wanted and wouldn't let me have.
Mhm.
And he could have just been like, F y'all, like, y'all gonna give it to her, or I'm not gonna help you with your business ventures. Boom, boom, bam, we're
Right.
done.
He could have
And
bought it and then
and
had
then
Tiana buy
gave
it
it
from
to
him.
her. Yeah, he could have did all
Like
that
even if
stuff.
Tiana wanted to pay for it, like
Yeah,
he could have bought it and then did whatever you
yeah,
know what I mean, sold it to
and
her. So
and
yeah, there's
and
just
it's but I feel like, to be fair, that is within his character as a sugar mill person to not have
mhm.
offered that at all, to be holding court right
Mhm.
up in her face in her restaurant and still be
Mhm.
like, I'm not gonna lift a finger to help you in your plight, even though I regard you as my extended family, quote unquote, because you know how white
Right.
folks are with considering black folks are extended family, especially in this time
Mhm.
period or whatever, what that whole vibe is.
Mhm.
So I just like
And I
the
think
parts of that it feels like it's modern day. I get, but I'm like, that did read real to me, that he
no, that
actively
did,
wouldn't lift a
but
finger for that.
it it was realistic, but it was more like it didn't it was all covert, I guess is maybe the way to say it. Like it was all like it didn't again, this it wasn't the focus of the story. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like but
yeah,
it was just the thing that like as I kept reading it, it was like the subtext here
yeah.
is like so
She
much
could have had
that
her cater her
it's not
parties. That's like, to be honest,
even
I was like, bet. Why hasn't she been catering any of their events? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what
she
is?
catered one like their Mardi Gras, whatever, but that was in the movie. Um and that was when she got turned into a frog. But like yeah, so it was just again, it's fine. We talked about it, but
Yeah,
that was
but
a
it's another
big
sticking
thing
point.
of like as I was reading it, that was one of the bigger things. I'm like, a sugar baron? I was just like, excuse
So
me?
was he not? You couldn't tell what his industry was in a movie.
They probably mentioned it, but again, it's a movie, so they just might
Yeah.
say it, and then I'm just not even thinking about it anymore. You
Hmm.
know, like we've moved on. We're singing. Like that's kind of how it. You know.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah. Okay, really quickly, Facilier, I think also is related to that in the sense of like we get more of his like backstory and But we also like see he has a lot of resentment, and I think like specifically towards the LaBeoufs. And the story, or like he kind of we talk about words. He thinks a lot about wanting to rule the city, and thinks a lot about not having, or what he doesn't have, and feeling entitled to more.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a moment where we kind of talk about, well, I'll get back to that in a second. But I think that part was another thing where I was kind of like, I think his character would have been helped by going deeper, actually. Just in the sense of like his resentment felt very one dimensional. Like
Yeah.
that part of it felt very one dimensional, but like he's a black man in the 20s. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there was just like, I felt like we could have gone deeper, and that was something that I kind of wanted from his character. But again, I understand why we didn't go that far. But it was just something about him, like, when he's thinking about his life with his mom, and like he's thinking about like the way these men like kind of look down at him when he's like on the street, doing the cards or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, but why is it this way? Right? Like, I think
Yeah.
the legacy of slavery is very heavy over this story, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not at the same time.
Yeah, like
Um,
he mentions that his mom was a voodoo practitioner and was able to she was like they were on their like last resources and dregs of their resources, and she was still healing people and still being part of the
mhm,
community. And so that helped me get a better understanding to an extent of like where he didn't have that, like where like other, because I feel like no matter the time period, Black folk who like were like there's a level of community mindedness that comes with Black folk um when we just kind of like help each other out, because like we're
mhm,
all we got for them most of the time. And but that has to
mhm.
be something that like is a mutually thing. Like sometimes it's like it starts off one-sided and then people get better
It
about
becomes me,
reciprocating
yeah.
it. But for the most part, it's a thing that like you can expect. Except for sometimes people get disconnected from it and they dislike it. They
Mhm,
feel burdened by it. They don't want to be part of that ecosystem. They reject it. And his
mhm,
rejection of it, with that um back piece of his mother having done that even at the last those, and then he's just like, where was everyone whenever she was gone? I was on these streets by myself or whatever.
right.
And he was abandoned. And then he has that like lingering resentment and bitterness. And it was the one-sidedness of it for me that felt very like from the perspective of like an oligarch of how they feel about poor people or people who just don't
Mhm,
have as much money as them, so everyone's poor in comparison to them, is
right.
that they think that poor people, quote unquote, are angry at them because we are just envious and would like to be where they are and would like to use the same resources they use. And while there are people who are
Mhm,
that, and Facilier is an example of that, I feel like there's like you're saying, there's a more depth that could have been given to that component of it all, because he seems to have, while he's also resentful of the rich folk, he's also like contemptuous of them and feels like he's like better than them and that he could do it all better. And I'm like, I like he says stuff like about like he could live in LaBeouf's mansion and he could have his
mhm,
money and do better things, but not like community things. And he doesn't have any actual
right.
like dreams that he would like of like we don't see him have like, I have a
He's not
dream
like a vision
of
for
yeah.
like New Orleans in the future.
Yeah,
It's
he
literally
just
just,
like
I'm gonna
lust
be
over
in
the
power.
power. Yeah, he has there's
Yeah,
nothing
and it's
that
like, to
comes
do
from it.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like, but I also think that it then is also an interesting thing, because they also talk about, or also shows how he kind of took shortcuts, right? Like his mother was a healer, she practiced um voodoo, and like, but he just wasn't interested in that, again, because he wants the power and he has that resentment, and so he's taking shortcuts, and that's how he got into this deal with like his friends on the other side or whatever. Um and it kind of shows how him taking those shortcuts then comes at a detriment to him, and that's like what kind of defeats him in the end.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think with his character there were some really interesting things that were introduced, but I just felt like they didn't go deep enough,
Hmm.
and I think it would have been cool to see like more of that.
My thing is, honestly, I think the story length was like perfect for what we got. And when I finished it, I was like, I could easily see us getting more from this universe because there's just more
Mhm.
that could be said about
That could
some of
be
these
fleshed
things.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Louis, I didn't have that much to say about him other than that, like, I thought it was interesting that he was trying to deal with the idea of, like, of being homesick, but also having his dreams and, like, the things that he wants to do and that he wants to do, like, be in New Orleans and, like, in the human world. Um,
He's basically
yeah, I thought that was
Ariel, but like an alligator.
yeah, right? Literally. Literally. Yeah, and I just liked that part of it, and, like, obviously we couldn't go, like, deeper into it or anything, but, it makes sense. I think that, like, at the end of or I feel like in the movie, it's just like, yeah, he wants to play jazz and he's an alligator. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy, but it never, I didn't can't really remember how resolved it was,
Yeah.
So,
I like that they like thought
um
enough to like try to come up with a backstory for him, but he constantly is forgetting to keep his cover story up.
right,
I'm like,
and
that's
Tiana is like,
hilarious.
"Sir,
She's like, what is not
come on."
clicking? Come on. But I also think that it was sad to see him go back to the bayou and be like, oh, homie, don't even remember. Like, I'm a human. Like, he
No.
legit does
You
not
look like
know
a
who I am.
mhm.
And I would love to see again. There's like another story that comes out in the universe, where we get to see him go see Mama Odie, and maybe she comes up with a way for him to be able to communicate with his family. Because like he shouldn't, if he can get to the bayou, there's no reason why he should be cut off from his family. He's still in vicinity,
Mhm.
so yeah,
Right. Something.
yeah.
Lisette?
I think that I listed her because I just thought it was fun to have like her characteristics lend her to be more of a main character for this universe, and that she is like someone within the vicinity of like magic practitioners. She understands what they do, even if she doesn't have the knowledge to do it herself. And she's
Mhm.
gifted enough in her healing efforts that she is able to like make it an enterprise with Naveen's help. So I think and she's like young, she's like 15 or so, whatever. So I really enjoyed her
Mhm.
character. Like what little we get of her character, I enjoyed that part. And the fact that she's just like she's someone who gives help even without her having any investment in the situation. She's like, oh well, people need help, and I have the means to help them. I'm gonna do it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And Miss Rose, I feel like we talked about her, I think, for the most part. I liked that it was again, same with Lisette, like somebody who is just down to help. She's just there and she's like, Tiana clearly got some stuff going on and she needs some support.
But she
And I
says it
understood
all
why
in like
Tiana
Creole riddles, which makes it worse. Like,
literally
how are we
was just
helping
like,
people if they
girl,
can't understand us? Is my
please
question.
talk straight. Like, come on.
And I guess part of the lesson there is that like Tiana is all about like not wasting time, and she's there to be like, this is worth your time to stop,
Mhm.
think, consider a riddle, like
Mhm.
apply it to your life, figure out what that means. Like it's worth
Right.
you taking the time to do that. So I like that she's kind of
And
like a
she's like
speed bump
rushing,
character. Yeah,
especially in the end where like, she's dealing with her dad and stuff and it's like, no, like you feel like you don't have time, but actually this is the thing that's gonna get you to solve the issue. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like sometimes you have to take a second, drink some tea, and then and get the tea, right?
yeah.
Like you have to take the time to get the information in order to like solve the problem.
Tiana is low key Alexander Hamilton from like the play Hamilton. Like she's
Mm,
like running her restaurant like she's running out of time. And like you
literally.
can understand why she's there because her father literally like is like part of this deal where she made the deal partially because she felt like she had run out of her time with her father whenever he like was gone while she was still young. So that's already been that's part of like her ingrained like feelings about life is that she's always like feeling like she's like behind on like she doesn't have enough time with people. She doesn't have enough time to do all the things she wants to do. And that was something that kind of like killed me throughout the story, was that like she's like, I've been saving up my whole life and I've always had this one mission and I don't ever have enough time to get all these things done. It's like, you're 19 years old.
Right.
And I understand being like growing up and being like, I gotta have this and this done by this when I'm by the time I'm 25. And I understand that, but I'm like, somebody has to be like, homie,
who's gonna tell her? Who's gonna tell
You're
her?
19, bro. And I feel like Miss Rose is the person who's supposed to is the person who's like, relax.
Yeah. Absolutely. Any final thoughts? Any things we didn't cover?
I made an observation in my notes, and I'm trying to pull it up real quick because I think it was just a funny thing to happen conversationally, and I wanted to note that. Okay. So Tiana is in the market and she's like trying to avoid Facilier. He's like kind of forced her into a conversation she does not want to be in. She doesn't want to talk to him ever. So this is every conversation she has with him is under duress. She does not want to be in a conversation with him. And I'm just going to read the passage that I thought it was funny. So Facilier was suddenly in front of her, blocking her path. Tiana yelped, but the buzz and chatter around the busy market drowned her cry. Facilier lowered his head until he was eye level with her. I've been polite. You do not want me to get nasty. She waved her arms in front of his face, inches from her own. What do you call this? You see this little bit of fog that's been hanging around the city? Facilier scoffed. It's nothing. My friends can show you what real smoke looks like. This man literally said he wanted all the smoke.
He said he wanted all the smoke.
And
I was ready for the smoke.
He said all the smoke.
I did. When I read that, I also thought that, but I didn't make a note of it. So yes, it was a bar.
It was a bar. And that's page 161.
He's a fraud, but it was a bar.
It up. It was I was like, he said, who wants all the smoke? I want all the smoke.
I do.
I want it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like I'd recommend this book especially if you're a Princess and the Frog girly or a person, but you know, if you mess with Princess and the Frog,
so romance between,
even if you don't, I think you would enjoy it. Like I think there are a lot of good things to enjoy, but I think that if you like are really into that movie, like you should definitely pick this up. It would, you know, it's like a sequel, but it's not.
Even as a non-watcher of the movie, I am a historical fiction girly and a fantasy. I love me a historical fantasy.
Same.
They're just so hard to find. So I take a moment for
the ones that I find. Oh my god,
they're just so hard. Okay, especially black ones.
Literally.
Those are the hardest, and I'm just like, okay.
We have discussed this, but it's rough. It's rough out here.
So this Almost There really did like hit those notes for me. The levels of like spooky and dark in there, if you like that kind of stuff. Again, it's not full on, but it's enough to make you be like, are we going there? And then again, like Bayana said, it's Disney, so it's like, no, we're not going full on horror, but you get a couple of feelings of that. And there's also like a moment of body horror. It's not a big body horror, but the way that it's described, I mean, as a person who does not like blood, there's like two of them. But the one that really stuck with me was a busted lip from like playing trumpet. And I like haven't played an instrument and been in band and have seen. It was just ugh. And so like, but I'm like, the horror parts like are kind of in the story that you don't really expect. So if you like stuff like those components and stuff and you haven't seen the movie, I would recommend it. If you don't mind the Disney-ish part of it, because I can understand you liking those things and being like, but I don't F with Disney like that, then sorry. But if you don't mind,
it's very Disney. It's historical fiction, but or historical fantasy, but it's Disney-fied.
Yeah,
historical.
Yeah.
So you just have to know that going in that like they're not going to interrogate the fact that this man is a sugar baron, and you just have to roll with it.
Okay, sure.
You're just like, I guess so.
Okay. Yeah. Farrah Rochon is known for being a romance novelist, and the moments of romance in here are like warm and fuzzy feeling.
They are.
So
There
I
were a couple
think
moments when Naveen would say something, and I was like, "Uh-oh, Tiana, what are you like, girl? You better stop playing around. Stop playing in his
like you
face."
were girls. Like I know this. I know you know
Like
this man
I
flirts.
definitely by the end I was like, why can't she be with him again? Because
Right?
I just feel like
She was questioning. She was like,
who is
wait a minute. She's
Facilier
like,
anyway? Like,
she was like falling for it, and then she's like, wait a minute, Facilier. Okay, all right,
right,
I can't touch
my
this.
bad.
Nope.
Never mind.
Away from
Never
this.
mind.
Get me away. Nope. Naveen, you and your trickery and your flirting weeks and stuff. Keep that. Your glittering eyes.
Can't do it. No, get away from me.
Get away from me. If you're into romances that do that, this is it.
Yeah, this is definitely the book for you.
That's it. And to say all that to say, that's Naveen was a highlight for me. I love Tiana. We really get along on like Capricorn. I don't want to owe nothing to nobody. Please don't make me feel like I'm in debt to you. I will do my best. Oh crap, like this is friendship. No, I don't owe you. Oh crap. Like that crap I get so hard. And I fully relate to Tiana. But the MVP, that one of the MVPs for me was Naveen because of how well he, like I was mentioning earlier, had to like care for her thing. And then the other one was Miss Rose, who was like the sidelined help that she didn't know she needed. Well, she knew she needed, but she wasn't aware she was receiving. My only subtraction from that description of Miss Rose is the fact that like you got to know who you dealing with. If they can't take help from like a riddle, you need to get like baby food them into the riddle. I don't know.
Yeah,
but you can't just be out here giving help without making clear you're giving help. That's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree. I did make Miss Rose my MVP, but also sometimes the riddles are not really helpful, and I feel like it's such a like fantasy trope to have some one person, like some dude who's just like, I'm on your side, but I can't tell you directly what's happening.
I'm going to mysteriously be an older person that is like helping you along your journey, but you don't know how I'm helping you.
And I'm like, please just be for real.
Yeah.
Like, just tell me. Benched.
Now, let's be clear. The real villain of the story, and will always be rich white men.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now that like I was kind of like, actually I think Mr. LaBeouf is my bench.
I didn't see him doing any underhanded things that I could like cite
he didn't
him
do
for,
anything,
but I know
but he's benched. Like honorable mention.
He's benched. Yes.
Honorable mention is him.
Yes. But also kind of Disney too, because if it weren't for Disney, then this wouldn't be Disney-fied. You know what I mean? Like Song of the South is the reason why we have a Tiana in this way. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So F also kind of like that. So that's when I say like rich, like that's who are rich white men are the ones to blame. Those are the rich white men in my head. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The same kind of rich white men that are anti-DEI because God forbid we actually learn the reasoning behind why things are the way they are in society.
Right.
That's why we have, again, that's why
why a kind, benevolent sugar baron doesn't really make sense.
Right. Where like black people who were freaking forcibly removed from Africa became labor, like we're immigrants looking for work in the US, please. Like that's where I am right now. Let's be for real. So that's a true villain. And
yes.
Facilier is who I'm naming because for the story,
and
I mentioned
definitely
he is the issue here because like at any point in the story, he could have been a better person, and he has moments where you're like, this man, honestly, and Tiana even herself is like, for a moment she's like, she's low key tests him with like an option and a question, and he takes the bad route, and she's like, nah, he's beyond saving, and it's hard to be there. You know what I mean? You don't want to give up on somebody like that, but that's where we get to, and that's why I'm wholly for there being a more coming from this universe, because I just feel like there's a lot more to get into from there.
Yeah, so agreed. I also
benched, but with like an asterisk is what I'm.
He's benched in the context of the story. But we all know who the
true villain,
who really needs to sit down. On that note, thank you for listening. Join us on Wednesday when we discuss chapters 10 through 12 of Amari and the Great Game.
Wizard Team is part of the Black Nerds Create Collective. If you would want to keep up with our content, you can check our website at blacknerdscreate.com and follow us on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod and at Black Nerds Create.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.